Okay, so today I'm going to work on changing the distributor out. Kind of already started. Get the cap off. And then putting in the MSD Pro Billet distributor, and we're going to put the Nitrous Mini in. That way we can use the 6AL programmable ignition box to pull the timing when we turn the nitrous on. Okay, so I've already started on this. I just took the cap off. Now, when you take these off, you want to make sure that you mark which one was number 1, which my son's already done that. So that's where number 1 was. And it was setting kind of like that. Now, before you pull the distributor out, you want to mark which way this is pointing. That way you don't have to find top dead center and redo everything again. So I'm just going to make a little mark on the vacuum hose for the brake booster where that's pointing at. And then I'm also going to mark where this was pointing at when it was on there as well. That way, when I put the distributor back in, I'm going to make sure the rotor's facing this way. I'm going to make sure the distributor, terminal 1, is pointing in the same direction that he had it. That way, when I put everything back together, I can just put the plug wires back on in the correct firing order. And the firing order on a small block Chevy is 18436572 clockwise. So, you know, look at on the cap, 18436572, and he's already marked the plug wires really good. So I just went ahead and yanked them off. Now, if your plug wires aren't marked, you probably want to mark them before you go taking them off there, especially if they run all the way down there like that and you're having a hard time figuring out which one's which. But now if you're running up the valve cover or something like that and you can easily tell which one's which, you don't have to really go through all that. But the way the cylinders are numbered on a small block Chevy is the driver's side right here is 1, 3, 5, 7. And then on the driver's side, they're numbered as 2, 4, 6, 8. And again, the firing order is 18436572. Most of the stock intakes will have that on there, but when they go on clockwise. So that's cylinder 1, which would be way up there in the front. 8, which would be this one way back here. 4 on that one, which would be that one right there, and so on, 18436572. But I'm gonna mark that hose right there, and then I'm gonna pull that distributor out, and then I'm gonna take the gear off. These distributors, they have certain gears on them that you're supposed to run with certain cams. For instance, with the roller cams, I guess you're supposed to use the brass gear. I forgot exactly how that goes, but you know, you want to make sure that your cam gear and your distributor gear are compatible, or you're going to have a big mess of chewed up stuff down in your oil pan. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and mark everything up, pull everything out, and then we got this MSD Pro Billet distributor we're going to put in. Because if you listen to my last videos, we kind of messed up that HEI distributor when we tried to lock it out. And rather than fooling with that, we're just going to upgrade to the MSD Pro Billet distributor. But yeah, we'll work on that. Alright, so I went ahead and marked on the valve pan cover where the number 1 terminal was pointing at. It's not an exact science, but I kind of did like a straight line from the nitrous solenoid to there to right here. for the mark, so I can remember that. And then over here, I just kind of made a little mark on the vacuum hose for the brakes, brake booster, which that comes over to a vacuum canister, then goes to the brake booster to help with the vacuum of the powered brakes, since the cam's so big and doesn't make that much vacuum. But anyway, there we go. Also on the HEI, you got some wires that are going to plug in here before you pull your cap off. Make sure you take those wires out. One of them goes to the magnetic pickup and all that stuff down there. And then you got your tack and your battery here, which we had this one wired up for the 6AL programmable, so it was hooked up a little bit different than what your typical HEI would be hooked up. But yeah, before you pull your cap off, make sure that you do take those wires off. They just snap here and here, and then the front ones snap here and here. Just unsnap them and push them out. Then to get the distributor out, there's a bolt right there. Now this one is a little hard to get to because this intake has the water lines for the rear jackets. Water jackets on a typical small block Chevy, the water jackets just end at the intake, and then they cross over the intake in the front. But this one, we got it this way because we're going to be spraying nitrous, and we want to make sure those rear cylinders stay nice and cool. So we got this intake that flows nitrous, or flows water up through the intake. That way you got good flow on the rear cylinders and get better cooling on the rear cylinders. But yeah, you take that bolt out. Sometimes you can take that loose, and then there's a clamp that bolt pushes down on to hold the distributor in, and sometimes that clamp will slide back, and then you can pull the distributor out. I can't get in there good enough to see if that one slides back or not, but anyway. And then you just pull the distributor straight out. So here's the bolt and clamp that hold the distributor in, and show you, see how it slides back and forth. You just loosen it up, then you slide the clamp back, and then the distributor should come out. Now when you take the distributor out, when you pull up on it, the rotor is going to spin a little, and it'll do the same thing when you put it back in. But just like that, you pull it right out, and there's what it looks like when you take it out. You got your old pump drive shaft down in there. Now you want to make absolutely sure nothing falls down in that hole, so we're just going to stick a rack down in there for now, a clean rack, and then we'll work on taking this gear off and putting it on the MSD. Not sure what gear comes on the MSD, but that is the correct gear for this cam, so I'm just going to put that one on there just to be safe. So the only thing that holds that pin in, or this gear in, is that pin. Now when you put these back on, you want to make sure that divot is as close as line to the rotor as possible. So that's the side that's supposed to go on. I don't think it matters a big difference, but yep, I've always been told that divot lines up with the rotor. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but that side's supposed to be pointing at the rotor side, where the rotor's pointing. So I'm going to take me a punch. I'm going to knock that out. I'm going to do the same thing on that one. And then I'm going to lock that one out with the instructions in the box. So locking this MSD distributor out, is pretty easy. The first thing to do is take off the oil drive gear, and then you got these springs and these weights. These weights went in there just like so on these pins with the bushing on top, and then you had a spring going from there to there on both sides. The weights were on both sides too, and then there's the springs. So you just pull this out of it. If I can get it to come out with one hand. And then you'll need to take that nut off and that bushing off. And then you just spin it 180 degrees, and then it goes in that hole. And then you put the nut back on the other side, and that locks it out. Then you don't have any. This one didn't have the vacuum, it only had the mechanical advance, so that locks it out. So we're going to lock it out, and I'm going to put that gear back on it, put the rotor back on it, and then we'll get it installed. There we go. I took the bushing, the washer, and the lock nut off and stuck it in the small hole, and that's the hole that locks it out. The big hole is where it goes in if you want to use the bushing for the mechanical advance. There we go, it's locked out, and then we're going to put the nut and washer back on it and put it back together. And they make the rotor where it only go on one way. See there? That one's a square, that one's a circle. Here's your bolt hole, and there's the square, and there's the circle and the other bolt hole. So that's the way it has to go back on. So to come to find out, the HEI shaft that gear goes on is a different size than the shaft that comes on the MSD Pro Billet distributor. So I wasn't able to change those gears out. But after doing some research online, that's a melanized gear. And the one that came on the MSD Pro Billet, you can tell by looking at them. Like the cast iron gears, they're a duller look. And then you got the brass and the melanized hardened, and then there's another top. But anyway, that was the same top. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in like that. But when you're trying to put the distributor back in, there's this little notch right there. So that notch goes, the shaft goes in that notch that goes to the oil pump. And that's what turns your oil pump and gives you your oil pressure. The cam gear turns this gear. So there's many different ways that this gear will go onto the cam gear. But now there's only two ways that oil pump drive will go in that slot, because it's like a fork that goes up in there. So when you drop this thing down in there, as you can see, we're not all the way down, but we're about where we want to be. So there's my mark where I want the rotor to be. So you can see I'm a little behind that, and the reason for that is because when this goes down and meshes with the cam gear, the drive shaft gear meshes with the cam gear, it's going to turn clockwise something. So and that'll put me about right there. But now what you can do to get your oil pump shaft lined up is you can try to turn it with a screwdriver down in there and try to line it up, or you can just turn the motor over by hand, or just bump the starter until it falls down in there. And I'm going to try with the screwdriver first, because I want to make sure that goes right down in there and lines up with that mark I got. So I don't have to fool 3 times anything, but if I can't get it lined up, I'll pull that out and try to see what the orientation is for the oil pump drive, and see if I can't reach down in there with the screwdriver and turn that oil pump drive where I need it and try to get it straightened out. If that don't work, then I'm just going to stick it back down in there where it's at. I'm just going to bump the starter over until it falls in place, because we're already meshed on the distributor gear and the cam gear. So if I bump the motor over, it's going to turn and the rotor's going to turn with it, and it's going to stay in that spot. And then once it hits the oil pump shaft where to slide in there, it'll drop down. Sometimes it's best to have someone push a little pressure right here, but not on the rotor, because that thing's going to spin when you're bumping it. But anyway, I'm going to get that all the way down in there. Alright, so here's where I'm at now. I got the distributor and my phone on my battery on my phone went dead, so I had to recharge it. So instead of sticking a screwdriver down there and turning that oil pump shaft, which probably would have took forever anyway, I didn't have a screwdriver long enough to feel comfortable sticking down in that hole without dropping it. You drop a screwdriver down in there and you can't get it out, you're in a world of trouble there. Probably have to take the intake and everything back off. But anyway, the rotor was pointing about right here, and we wanted it to point about right there. But when it dropped down more, the rotor is going to turn clockwise as it meshes with the cam gear. So that put us pretty close. If it didn't, it'd just be a little back, and that's fine. So what I also did was I went ahead and put the distributor clamp in, and I put it, this intake has the choice of putting it on either side, so I put it on this side. Just if you take that clamp all the way out, you really don't have to. You can just loosen the bolt and slide it back. But if you take it all the way out, it's bowed. Make sure the bowed side goes up, not down, because if you put it down, it's not going to hold anything. So, yep, and make sure the bowed side's up. I bumped it over, it fell in. I put the cap on, I went ahead and put the wires back on. Again, 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. So now, when you run an HCI with one of the boxes, ignition boxes, you got the orange and black wire. It comes off the ignition box, and then there's a special wire that you have to put in the HCI and run to that. But anyway, the orange and black wire go to this, and then you have to run an extra ground too, which he had right there, and I undone. It's just hanging there. But, and you can see what holes those go in. But anyway, the only ones we're going to use now is this orange and black one. They're going to go to the Blaster 2 coil we got, which is right there. And I'm just going to we didn't get a bracket with it, which sucks. I'm going to mount it somewhere right there. And then I've got to make a plug wire that goes from there over to there. And I'll probably separate them wires a little bit better. I just got it on there for now. So, orange to positive on coil, black to negative on coil. Run a spark plug wire over there. And then we'll try to start it. If we don't, we'll move the distributor. When I tightened that clamp down, I didn't tighten it down real tight. I just tightened it. I want to still be able to turn this. Once we get it where we want it, then we'll lock it down. That's where I'm at now, so I'm gonna work on a cool bracket. I'll probably see if I can't order one. If I can't, then I'm just gonna make one out of that sheet metal right there, and then screw it to that AC delete, HVAC delete he's got there. And yeah, that's where we're at so far. Alright, so here's where we're at now. Something I did forget. The bottom of that distributor It's supposed to get a gasket down there. You can see it now. But yeah, like on this one, there's a gasket and it goes right up against that. But I forgot that like an idiot. I had to pull all that out and put it back in. But I made me a plug wire. And then I got the coil just sitting up here. And then from the ignition box, orange to positive and black to negative. I ordered a mount, an MSD mount that's actually made for that from Advance Auto. And I gotta go pick it up tomorrow. But yeah. So, hopefully, after taking the distributor out of there twice and putting it back in there twice, hopefully I got everything. The idea was to get everything right back where it's supposed to go. Oh, something else. When I make these plug wires, I just use this tool right here. You don't need no fancy tools to make plug wires. A little bit of electrical grease to feed the spark plug wires through the boots, and then crimp them on. That's the hardest part, is pushing the wire through the boot and pulling it back through. You pull it through and then you crimp the terminal on, then you got to pull it back into the boot. And yeah, but I just use those. They work great. Right there's the one that crimps it on. I guess I should have did a video on that part too, but oh well. We're just doing the distributor right now, but let's see if it starts. See how close I got. That's the main thing. So we put everything back just about where it was before. Actually, it was more turned a little. Yeah, we'll see if it starts first. Oh, I'm not making y'all dizzy with the camera. Alright, pump her a couple times. Well, look at that. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. But, so yeah, I got it close. But now, if you was doing this from scratch, what you will have to do, see, I just pulled mine out and marked where everything was and put it back in. But if you was doing this from scratch, you got to get the #1 piston at top dead center on the compression stroke with both valves closed. I usually take the valve cover off when I do this. And what I do, or you really don't even have to do that. If you take the spark plug out, have somebody stick their finger in that hole. And just enough to cover the hole up where there's no air pressure. And have someone bump the starter. It'll go poof like that and blow your finger off. That's the compression stroke. That's where you need to be. So when you stab your distributor, you want your #1. See, #1's pointing over here. Actually, it was pointing about right here, but you're supposed to have #1's actually supposed to be on this terminal, pointing at this one. But I mean, if you get it off a little bit and just want to turn the distributor a little bit, whatever. But that's where this one was before. And that distributor don't have the vacuum advance, so it doesn't matter. I can turn that distributor as much as I want. Now, if you got a distributor with a vacuum advance, you probably want to try to get it as close as possible, because you can only turn the distributor to get it in timing so much. With that vacuum canister on there, you'll get to where the vacuum canister on the other side. That HEI don't have it on there either. So, but or I'd show you what I'm talking about. But the vacuum canister start hitting stuff. So technically, #1 should be like right here. We're here. And then #1 should be pointing like in a straight line with the #1 cylinder right to it. But like I said, if it's a tooth or two off, you can get by with it. Maybe just moving the spark plugs and turning the distributor. Now, the next thing I have to do is to time it with the timing light. So you got the time. I'm not going to do that tonight because it's laid out. The neighbors will get mad at me because this car's open headers right now. So I got this 0 mark right there. So, and then this is marked. Right there is actually where we've got marked 34 degrees. So we like it at 32. I don't know what it's going to like on the dyno. We'll figure that out. But these are marked, and the big marks are 10, and the small marks are 1. I don't know if you can see an angle good enough to see the big marks. Yeah, there's right at the end is a big mark. So it turns clockwise, but the 0 mark is up that way on the balancer. So it 0 up there, 10, 20, 30, and then 34 is right there where that mark's at. So when we use the timing light, some timing lights you can just set to 36 and line the 0 up on the tab with the 0 up on the balancer. But those, I've had problems with those types of timing lights, and I don't like to use them. So I just use a standard one that flashes, and I find 30, 32, 36, wherever you want on the balancer. And then I line it up with the 0 on the balancer tab, and I get it in time that way. And yeah, so I'll time it up, get it all set, and then the next video is going to be putting the nitrous mini in it. Well, I'm going to put that bracket on. I probably won't make a video of that because this is really kind of thick metal here. So I'm just going to drill and tap, or just drill and use self-tapping screws. I really don't like to use the self-tapping screws, so that ain't as thick as I thought it was. Yeah, might just use self-tapping screws, but I'm going to mount the coil right there. I ordered the bracket, and I have to go to Advance and pick it up tomorrow. We'll mount that up, and that'll be it for that. I'll put the little fancy cap on it and the 2 screws that come with it. That's it. MSD Distributor install. Small Block Chevy.